Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from AnthonysCustoms, and for this review we are looking at the SH Figuarts Street Fighter V RYU figure, the first figure from the batch, and boy am I excited. You guys know when it comes to Street Fighter figures, there's nobody that's more interested in them than I am, and I have to tell you right off the bat, this guy does not disappoint. Maybe in a few tiny little spots here and there, but overall it's very solid and I'm very happy to show it to you. So let's go ahead and get it off the stand and take a closer look. Alright, I did turn the lighting down a little bit for this guy since he's wearing kind of a mostly white outfit. So hopefully it's not too dark and hopefully it doesn't wash anything out at the same time. We'll see in editing, but hopefully it looks good for you guys. I'm going to do the best I can to show you all the detail because there is quite a bit. Though that's kind of an issue. We'll talk about that as we go. First of all, let's talk about the size. He stands just about 16 centimeters to the top of the head, which makes him just about almost exactly 6 1/4 inches. So you're probably wondering, how does that size stack up to some other figures? And I normally don't do this, but since he's from a fighting game and since we got a recent release of this guy from another line, we're going to go ahead and line up a couple of things just so you have an idea. Now, I don't have my soda figures with me. They are in Texas, unfortunately, so I can't compare it to that. But since he's about 6 1/4 inches, if I remember correctly, the soda RYU was about that size also, the original release, not the Revolutions or the Previews version. But you can go back and check that review. I'm sure I measured his height in there. Anyway, let's put him up against, this is the Ultimate Spider-Man. Let's move the camera down a little bit. There we go. So there's Ultimate Spider-Man, and just for the heck of it, here's a movie Spider-Man, which gives you more of an adult Spider-Man size, so you have an idea about that. And then let's go ahead and throw in a Cyclops figure, because that's a very familiar build we've seen a bunch of times. So it looks like he lines up pretty well, if maybe not a little bit too tall, to be completely honest. And then here's this guy, because I know you guys want to compare the two, even though this one's definitely not in the same scale. Let's move Psych out of there just so you can see. They said right off the bat, this guy is upscaled a little bit, and he does. He makes this guy look tiny. He dwarfs him. So let's move these guys aside. You got that look. Let's just talk about these two for just a second. People keep asking, which is better? I'm going to tell you neither. They're both different. They have different styles entirely, and they have different things that are good about each of them. Obviously, this one is very dirty looking, this one's very clean looking, this one's sculpted by hand, this one's digitally sculpted. This one might have better range and articulation, this one might be a little bit bulkier and have better looking sculpt. I mean, there's different things going for each one of them, so they're both good. All I can tell you is you're going to have to decide based on objective things, I guess, if you don't care about the style. And that's what these reviews are for. And then once I've given you the objective information, you can make the decision as to which one you like. I can't tell you which one to like. That's up to you. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go through all of the good stuff and the bad stuff objectively, and you can decide which one you want to buy if you're not getting both. Like, I'd imagine most of us are probably going to get both. Okay, so before we get into the figure itself, let's go ahead and talk about accessories. We have 3 interchangeable faces. We have the one stern face, we have the face with his teeth showing and him looking off to the side like he's charging up a Hadoken, and then we have the one where he's yelling with his eyes straight ahead, probably like he's fired the Hadoken. That would be what I would use those for. We have only 2 sets of hands. We have the fist hands, and then we have the Hadoken hands. Which, I wouldn't have minded an extra set of hands, which were a little bit more accurate for the firing of the Hadoken. Or it's just even something else that's good for like a martial arts pose or something. It wouldn't have hurt to have a spare set, though it's not entirely necessary. We do have the Hadoken, which comes with a little translucent stand, and I have to say the Hadoken itself is done very nicely. It's a nice translucent blue. It's a little bit weird that it's 2 separate blues rather than just shaded, but it looks pretty good nonetheless. And then we do have the white shading on the front, so that's nice. And then we have these 2 card back stand-up thingies which you put next to each other and make a background, which it's actually very nicely printed. It's very, very well done, and I suppose that's probably like a background for a stage or something. Never played Street Fighter V because it's a PS exclusive, unfortunately. But yeah, so those are nice accessories, and that's all that is included. Alright, so now we can talk about the figure. We're going to get the bad stuff out of the way first, or at least the biggest of the bad stuff, and there'll be a couple of things as we go. The first thing is, apparently, we are never going to get a RYU that looks like RYU. I don't know what it is. Storm kind of changed the face around and didn't look quite like him, and then here we go with Bandai. The eyes are way too wide, and maybe if they were closer it would look a lot better, but it just doesn't look like him. It'll do, it's not bad. I mean, the individual aspects of it look good, but the overall face just doesn't look like Ryu. It's a little bit disappointing. If you turn it sideways, it probably looks okay. Yeah, like that's fine because you can't quite tell, but his eyes are just way too wide and it's not quite right. It's not bad. I mean, it's not good, but it's not bad. It's just not quite there. Okay, so that's one issue. I guess if you want to ignore that, you can. It's easy enough to not notice it, so that's not the biggest deal. But then the other issue is that his gi is textured on the top. Let's see if I can zoom in and show you the texture if you can't already see it. Yeah, you can see that now. So there's lots of texture. It's clearly digitally sculpted, so there's completely covered in texture. But the pants are completely smooth. Why? Why are the pants completely smooth? Is that how it is in the game? I guess it's possible, but that wouldn't really make sense. So that's the other issue. Those are the most noticeable of issues. A lot of people are saying he's too slender, which you could definitely make the argument for Street Fighter V. He's particularly bulky, both in 4 and 5. But once you pose him, it doesn't really feel that way. You really only notice it like right in this region right here. And once he's posed, it's not that obvious. So that's really not that big of a deal, but it is something you may want to consider. And that's really it. There's one other thing that we'll talk about as we go, but otherwise it's pretty good. So let's get into it. The headband. Yes, it can be moved. That's my favorite thing. Anytime they don't do that, I hate it. And they did it. So it's not like on a hinge or anything, but you can move it around to any side you want, and that is more than enough, so I'm okay with that. Another thing they did that I absolutely love, I've been talking about this for years now, the head is on a double ball peg instead of a ball hinge. It's so much more effective and so much easier to pose. So you can just move the head around however you want on top of that ball peg. His does happen to be kind of loose, but it's not floppy loose, so that's okay. And then the neck itself is on a ball peg, so you can move his head around however you want to. Look at that, it's so nice. Double ball peg is definitely the way to go for the neck joints and head joints. I don't know why they keep doing it for Dragon Ball figures and other figures with the ball hinge, but that is perfect. I love it. Okay, so now we have the shoulders, which are kind of interesting. We have the butterfly joint in there, which isn't bad. It works nice enough. And then we have this piece here, which kind of hides it. Now, here's the thing. They connected this piece to that butterfly so that it can't really go anywhere. You can see in here how it's connected. That's not really ideal because in some poses you do end up having this kind of pucker and you can see it. And I think it would have been just as effective to have this be a floating piece that pegged in between the shoulder and the butterfly joint in there by the ball peg. It's not a deal breaker, obviously, but it's something to note. But you have the butterfly joint that moves around this way, which works nicely. And this is nice and soft plastic, by the way, so it won't really get in the way too much. Then you have the ball peg for the arm to move around. Now, it is a rather long ball peg. You can see right there. It definitely can be seen, but as you pose it and as you move this piece around, it really shouldn't be too hard to hide it, so I think that's okay. So then you have your ball hinge, which works very nicely. You have really no issue at all moving it around, so that's good. And you'll notice there's no bicep swivel here, but the swivel that's built into that ball hinge works very nicely. Like right without even doing anything, you can just rotate it almost 90 degrees right into the body. So you're going to get your bicep swivel out of the shoulder, and it works so well that I'm okay with it. I'm very happy with it. They did a great job executing that shoulder. Could have been a little bit better with the cloth part, but that's not a big deal. For the elbow hinge, we have a double hinge, which works very nicely. Not loving the fact that we have this cap down here, the way it sticks out, but it's not a deal breaker by any means, so that's okay. And then you do get another swivel in there if you need it. So kind of like the Kinnikuman figures, it'll work just fine. For the wrist, we have our standard ball hinge. It's not a tiny one, so that's good. You don't have to worry too much about it breaking. I do wish this was a floating piece and kind of hid the joint a little bit better, but it's, again, not a deal breaker. I think it'll be okay like that. Once you get imposed, it's not that bad. For the torso, I'm not sure exactly what's going on in here. You can see the split. I believe it's a double ball peg for the upper torso to the lower torso, but I'm not certain. I'm not positive because I can't really get in there to see. But it does move around kind of well. It's just kind of hard to do for the upper torso. You can kind of hunch him over, and that works fine. You can lean him back, and it's fine. But that upper joint is a little tricky. But the lower joint, which is right here underneath the gi behind the belt, that one moves around really well. So you really have no issues there. You can kind of see it in there. It looks like it's a single ball peg that pegs into that white part. But it moves around very nicely. So you shouldn't have too much trouble posing him. It's a little stiff in the torso, but not too bad. This is a floating piece that just hides everything. And now here's something I really like. His hips work exceptionally well. Going forward, way better than horizontal. So that's very, very nice. And it doesn't look bad in any way. They definitely put the time and effort into designing this guy and engineering it. It works very nicely. But you can see it does throw some things out of whack, so you're going to have to kind of adjust for it as you pose, and then you'll be just fine. Looks so good. Love that. Love that. Great range. It's basically the same engineering as the newer Dragon Ball figures, but just executed on a much higher level, it seems. Then going out to the side, we are a little bit limited, but as you can see, that's still really far out to the side. So he's not doing the splits anytime soon, but it still works very well, and it doesn't look too bad. I think that looks okay, so that's good. Then you do have your thigh swivel built into that also, which works nicely. And then here's the issue, one of the other big issues I have with this guy. The knee is not a good design. It's a single jointed knee, so you don't get much better than 90 degrees, and it's ugly. It's way too thick here, and this should all be sculpted. Quick example, something they could have done to make this look much better is something just like this, and this is on the Figuarts model kit of Goku, Super Saiyan 4. You see how the inside part of the knee is sculpted? It's still just a single hinge, but it's sculpted and looks way better. That's all they had to do. That would have been great, but they almost never do that on figures, and I don't know why. So the knee is definitely a little bit ugly. It's going to give you enough range, but it doesn't look great. And then we have the ankle, which will rotate at the pant leg, which is very nice. It has the hinge, which goes all the way back, pretty far forward, surprisingly. We have our toe hinge, which is nice. And we have a nice ankle rocker, which works almost perfectly. Very, very impressed with this figure. Yeah, there are a few issues, of course, and we have to point them out because this is a review and that's what we do here. But ultimately, it is very, very, very nice, and I'm very, very impressed with it, and I'm super happy about it, and I have to recommend it. I think you guys will be very happy too. And it will be in stock at Big Bad Toy Store in the very near future. And I have a feeling once people realize that these are as good as we were hoping they were going to be, I think it's probably going to sell out. So you want to make sure you grab one soon. Real quick before we go, I'm going to point out that he does look really skinny because you have that gap between the chest and the arm when he's in a very neutral pose. But as soon as you pose him, it kind of goes away, and you'll see that in the photos here at the end. So there it is, guys. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. I have new videos up every single day. We talk about action figures and movies and TV shows and video games and all kinds of other fun stuff. So make sure you turn on notifications and don't miss any of that. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. And in the meantime, keep collecting.